how does the current moment and the crisis affect the way that we think about diversity and inclusion and equity for performance management? Let's, say on the performance management piece first, and then we can sort of approach this question again through a broader perspective about, other aspects around talent management and leadership as a whole. But first, your thoughts on how all of this current events and the disparities that are involved with the current events affect the way that we think about, or should affect the way, maybe that should be the question, should affect the way that we think about performance management.
Mm-hmm. So, I think the pandemic has illuminated the issues around equity in most organizations, so there is an opportunity. We cannot say we don't know any longer. It is very clear, even though the data's always been there, the research has always been there in terms of the trajectory of diverse people in organizations, in terms of promotion, hiring, development, et cetera. I think what the pandemic has done is illuminated those issues even more, because as we've had to look at the hot spots in our communities and the people that make up those communities, even though they may be at different social economic levels, many of them also work in our institutions and people know them. We also are looking at, as we sort of casually audit, and I say casually just because of the time, the inequities are popping up pretty clearly, that there is a lack of diversity. So the veil has been lifted in a way that it never has before, I think, Dr. Morgan, and it is just so much realer for people about the injustice and inequities in organizations as well as our society. So no longer can, I think, CEOs be allowed or can ignore that their organizations certainly are biased, minimally, racist to the extreme. And what are they going to do about that? The external pressure that exists today is forcing, I think, senior leaders to say, we have to do something differently, because this doesn't work anymore the way we've been living. And whether that's hiring more diverse people, promoting more diverse people, developing diverse people, and rates consistent with whites, and consistent what's in the demographic groups in their organization, those are to me the things that are starting to be really clear. And I'm finding I don't have to struggle as much to convince somebody at this moment that this is an important issue and that racism exists not only externally in those communities, but inside our organization. So what are we going to do about what's inside our organization, where we have control, right, where we can make decisions, where we can do something differently? Because out there, we may not be able to, but inside the organization, we certainly have all the power we need and authority and agency to get it done.
I think that's such an important point. We've seen a lot of fanfare, I think a lot of broad statements, a lot of dollars donated, whether for COVID or, for, recent events highlighting police brutality and injustices within the criminal system. It always comes back to me, there's a great Maya Angelou quote that says, when people show you who they are, believe them. And I think this is the time. There's a lot of words, and exactly, as was just mentioned, we need to start within our own organizations, right? Within the spheres of influence that we can control, and really do a deep dive on, how much are we actually looking at equity as it relates to performance reviews across not just gender lines, but racial lines? Right. How much are we actually looking at diversity as it represents our management, managers in our businesses, our board? And so I think companies will be hard pressed to say that we're all in this together, if in fact the data suggests otherwise, that there are things that they can do 100% within their control that are not being done. So I think it's hopefully a time where this momentum will be used to actually push forward some of the things that are very clear and actionable that need to be done to drive forward more diversity and inclusion within companies.
I would just add that this is the opportunity for companies to look at change on a very tactical level, and looking at disparity, because it's been a magnifying glass really put on what disparity looks like at a tangible level. So, we know, for example, that there's a difference in our employees' resource capabilities. But at a tangible level, that looks like, some employees have childcare during this time and additional help in the home, and other employees don't. We know about stereotypes and bias and how that can impact what happens in the workplace. But now we see at a very tangible level the impact of, when children are present for mothers versus for fathers, and what are the stereotypes that are activated in that very tangible way in those moments. From an inclusion standpoint, as you all have eloquently said, we know there's this challenge with bringing your whole self to work. But that has kind of accelerated into a whole new level when you are inviting your colleagues into your home. And so that's a whole new level, again, tangible examples of what it means and the challenges with bringing your whole self to work. And so I don't think the issues are different than what we've seen before. I think they're magnified, and they've given us tangible examples that we can act on with tactical solutions, I would hope, in organizations.